Hi there. In this video, I'm going to examine what countries was Game of Thrones most popular in, which will give us insight into where is the ongoing Game of Thrones franchise popular now that we're going into House of the Dragon, the first prequel. And this is an interesting question because there's multiple ways to measure it, and it has multiple implications. That for HBO itself, this should be a guide to where should they be expanding HBO Max first, where should they prioritize, and for us as YouTube channels, it's where should we be targeting our content. Well, how do we target content? I don't know, but at the very least, like, what subtitles should we be adding to things? What should we prioritize adding subtitles for if we ever get around to that? Now, there are three ways to measure this that complement each other. First, and the most accurate, but the one I have least access to, is that social media platforms actually measured country by country which ones were discussing the show the most during Season 8. Which is really interesting. I'm starting with that because it's objective and very clear, and clear-cut and straightforward. Second, we can go through the year-by-year rankings of the top 10 countries that were illegally downloading Game of Thrones episodes as a measure of interest in it. And third, the thing that I have the most detailed access to, but which is the least accurate, is I technically have access to my own YouTube channel's analytics page, that we get an analytics tool that tells us a breakdown of which countries are in your audience the most for me as a Game of Thrones channel. But not only am I one channel among many, it skews towards people who speak English. Because, I make content in English, so obviously the United States is overrepresented in that, as is the UK. But we can cross-reference that it shows me a list of the top 50 countries with percentage of total viewership. So I'm going to try to cross-reference all of these. First and foremost, social media rankings for Season 8, that they have lists of the top 5 countries. It was these two separate ports, one for Twitter and one for Instagram, both listing the top 5 countries that were discussing it the most based on hashtags. I think they also did a keyword search, but they measured this pretty accurately. So, during Season 8, the top 5 countries discussing it on Twitter in descending order were number 1, United States. Number 2, Brazil. Then, number 3, United Kingdom. Brazil did better than Britain in this. Then, number 4 is France. And number 5 is Spain. They filmed in Spain, of course. There's, a lot of activity on there, spy photos and everything. Then let's shift to Instagram. The top 5 countries in descending order were number 1, United States. Number 2, Brazil. Again. Then United Kingdom, number 3. That in Twitter or Instagram, the top 3 places discussing Game of Thrones Season 8 were the United States, then Brazil, then United Kingdom in that order. 4th and 5th were different for Instagram, though, that number 4 was India. India was one of the top 5 countries discussing this on Instagram. It came in at number 4. Then came number 5, Germany. That India did better than Germany there. But this makes sense that these are big international economies, G7 countries. For, France, Germany, you'd expect that to be a lot there. But this show is really popular in Brazil and India. I'm telling you that up front. That is the conclusion of this report. And it's reinforced by the next 2 points of these are really huge growth regions. And a major reason I'm making this report is in a reaction to, I think this is my own failing, first 5 seasons of this show, I think the fandom got really settled into thinking of it as a United States and UK show that occasionally has viewers and fan conventions or cast appearances in Germany or Scandinavia, because they have HBO Nordic. They already had a good HBO distributor there. But in places that didn't have a good HBO distributor, that didn't have a nascent streaming service yet, that had to wait to get HBO Go, like Brazil, they tended to be ignored. There was a demographic shift over time, is the point of this video. And people who really think of this as US-centric or even Western Europe-centric, there's a bigger growth in Brazil and India. And to be honest, a lot of people still think of it as just by, because we speak English. I see too many of the TV-only people focusing on the United States and on the UK. Like even, wow, people in Spain talk about this show, or France, is considered exotic to them. Whereas the book fandom, because it's a lot, slower because it's books. I mean, I'm not talking on the scale of 20 years. The book fandom is a lot more international on the book fan sites because they're slower, because it's people writing on message boards on Westeros.org and stuff and talking about, oh, here's our Spanish language official translation of Fire and Blood or something. Due to its, I think this is true of any book series, not just this one, that the TV show compared to the books, like Tolkien fandom, for example, I think the book fandom is a lot more international because it's both had more time and because it lends itself better to cross-language communication. Versus TV, it's shorter and faster, there's less time for socialization like that. I mean, book fandom, it's people who are willing to sit down and read an article, possibly in a different language, versus a tweet you can read in 1 minute. But let me go through how I reached these conclusions. Then we have top 10 countries illegally downloading it. Now, I only have records for seasons 5, 7, and 8. For some reason, whatever tracker websites were doing this didn't put out a report in season 6, so I'm stuck. But I have top 10 lists for 5, 7, and 8, and actually, for whatever reason, season 7 gave a top 15. What are the big conclusions you can see from this? Well, you have to look at it in context of other stuff, that if you look at it at first, you go, wait, Brazil was the #1 illegal downloader in season 5, but then it dropped out of the top 10 altogether. Wow, I guess people in Brazil stopped liking this show. No, it's 2017 was the year that HBO finally launched a legal and affordable streaming service in Latin America. That's when they got HBO Go, and it was like a switch going off. You could see that they went from being the top illegal downloader to not even the top 10, and that always stuck with me. That they would be like joking at panels and stuff, the showrunners and cast and crew of, wow, I guess people in Brazil sure like us if they're the #1 illegal downloader. It was a joke in season 5. And by season 8, it was, you need to be expanding internationally if you want to succeed as a streaming platform. I mean, look no further than all the stuff that happened to Netflix earlier this month. That Netflix, earlier in the spring, they had a terrible subscriber report. And then, of course, people panicked, started selling stuff. They're slashing all of their projects. They gutted their animation department. It's a global marketplace. And like the only place that Netflix was actually still gaining subscribers was in Asia. It's not like they stopped growing everywhere. It's just it didn't even out. But how much of a joke they treated it before of, I guess Brazil watches this, I don't know. And then, yeah, they dropped out of the top 10 illegal downloaders when they got a streaming service. But illegal downloaders can be a bit confusing because it's a mixture of two separate extremes. Countries that are so big but have it legally that there's always going to be a sub-fraction of people downloading it. The United States, for example, it's huge here. There's always going to be a sub-fraction of people who are illegally downloading it because they can't afford the streamer. But at the other extreme, you have places where they don't have a streaming service yet, and they don't want to buy all of HBO for this. That's why Brazil was downloading it. Or places like Iran and mainland China, where it's either not broadcast or so censored it's awful, People really want to see it. That's why, like, Iran and China, you'll see in these lists. However, HBO, much less us YouTube channels, we can't spread to Iran and mainland China, so we can overlook that. But generally, these top 10 lists line up with the social media listings. You see UK, France, Germany, those are in the top there, along with Canada and Australia, which makes sense because they are large economies and also are English as a primary language, so this TV show made in English appeals to them pretty well. That makes sense. Other spikes in this, bursts in this, line up with when HBO was promoting things, that just as 2017 for season 7, they actually got a streaming service in Brazil. 2017, HBO, for the first time, also made a big push to promote the show in Southeast Asia. So that's why you're seeing all these Southeast Asian countries there, like, Malaysia, Indonesia, that Philippines, that's no accident. That they had this big thing, they actually were promoting it heavily. They got HBO Go there. They put real effort into getting a Thai language dub that year. I remember, and people were remarking on, they actually went to the trouble of hiring real real movie actors from local Thai cinema. They didn't just have, an intern reading it off. That work went into this, and they took it seriously. And we saw this boost in illegal downloads, in interest from Southeast Asia that was never in the top 10 before. But then by season 8, there's even some African countries in there. That it has reached the point where it's spreading around the globe, to the point where it goes from America to Europe to now, last in the list, it's finally making the rounds to Southeast Asia and Africa, but I'll get back to that. Other big thing you need to notice is, again, the rise of India. The India started as the number 10 downloader. By season 7, it was number 4. By season 8, was the top illegal downloading country in the world for Game of Thrones episodes. They did launch a streaming service there in 2017, and you saw this explosion in interest in it. But it wasn't the best streaming. It's Hotstar, it's not HBO Max, and I guess it's the other way around. If there's so much interest in it that, almost like the United States, where people are both buying the legal service and even more people are illegally downloading it. But you get a feel from these 3 sets of lists, where is this popular? Where isn't it popular? If you notice by its absence, and this is backed up by my stuff I'll explain later, you don't see Japan in these lists, or Korea. That the show was never really popular in East Asia, and this was due to a variety of factors. They had a bad streaming deal, basically, of where isn't it popular? What are the major countries you're seeing here? So let's put all this up on the map now. This basically lines up with what we already saw from the social media lists. Let's just add in Canada and Australia as consistently among the top 10 illegal downloaders. The third and last tool we can use to measure this are the very detailed analytics reports I can get from my YouTube studio.